Hello, we're here for another episode of Clean Technica's YouTube news show. Joining us today, we have Jose Pontes, the king of EV sales reports around the world. And I feel like that's been the case for like 15 years now or something. I'm not sure if it's been that long, but feels like it's been that long. But we'll have. When did you start doing these? Uh,
Publicly, I started in 2012.
2012, so 13 years. I thought it might have been 2012. But yep, so we're going to jump into EV sales topics today. We're going to look at our forecast for 2026, what we expect for three major markets, China, Europe, and the US. And if we're brave enough, we'll also do that for 2030. So as well as Jose Pontes, I'm Zach Shahan, head of Clean Technica, and we have Larry Evans and Steve Hanley, who everyone should be familiar with by now. But if not, look us up on Clean Technica. So getting into it, I think we need to sort of give a kind of base situation of where we are in each of these markets. Let's start with the biggest market, China. And Jose, where is that market in 2025? Perhaps you can also say where it came from, where it was in 2024, and then and then we'll get into. Yeah, I think we can go straight to you to get into where you think it will be in 2026.
Okay. So regarding China, first of all, thanks for inviting me. And regarding China, so 2024, we had 25% BEV share, which added to the 23% of PHEVs, we get to 48%. So almost half of the Chinese market in 2024 was already plug-in. 2025 year to date, we are currently at 52% plug-in. And interestingly, the breakdown between BEVs and PHEVs has been changed. So while last year BEVs and PHEVs were basically on the same path, like 25% for BEVs, 23% for PHEVs, this year, BEVs are growing fast. They are now at 32% share, while PHEVs are now at 20%. So basically, BEVs are growing 20-30% year on year, while PHEVs in the past few months have started to decrease. All told, 2025, we are now at 52% plug-in share. And now for the forecasts. So, China is the easiest one to forecast because, let's say, the environment is more or less stable for the next few years. Although we have to highlight that some subsidies will be removed by the end of this year, which will mean there will be a small hangover early next year. With this in mind, I expect the plug-in share to end somewhere around 57%. So 5% increase more or less over this year.
So
And
yeah, and so you said 57% total plug-in, and what percent for BEV do you think?
I would say 37, 35, I would say. Yeah. Now, if we want to
Yeah, so
be
that's
a little bit,
2025. So do you want to maybe we'll have Larry and Steve jump in
yeah.
and talk about expectations for the coming year, and then we'll let you have the closing words on what you think will
Mhm.
happen in 2026. I know Larry follows the Chinese EV market very closely. Steve follows everything, but let's start with Steve. Steve, what are your thoughts on the Chinese EV market? Which I mean, I think you would agree has got to be the most fun and exciting. Clearly, by far the biggest EV market in the world.
Well, Zach, the thing that came out last week was when China announced their next 5-year plan for industrial policy. New energy vehicles, which we refer to as plug-in hybrids and battery electric cars, were omitted from the next 5-year plan, which suggests that the Chinese government thinks that they've done enough and that they can stand on their own pretty much from now on. Um, we'll see whether or not that's true. One of the things that the report indicated was that the Chinese government would like to see some of the weaker companies. The report I saw said that there were dozens of companies that had less than a 0.1% market share. So these are companies that are just hanging on by their fingernails, and clearly the government is not going to support them any longer. I think this probably suggests a consolidation in the Chinese market, and I would expect the big players, Xpeng and Neo and Leapmotor, Geely and BYD, to consolidate their gains, and within the next year or two, for there to be about half as many EV manufacturers in China as there are today.
I think half might be a little bit aggressive, but it is going to move fast. There are some other things that are going on in the market where they are tightening emission standards. They are, they're making safety updates in terms of, what batteries you're going to be able to use. It's going to change next year, which is going to shift the market even more towards LFP and safer battery chemistries and safer, in safer overall structures for the batteries. That's great for long-term growth. It's going to create some disruption, which is going to probably temper sales a little bit. There's a big question in terms of whether or not they're going to do the door handles next year or the year thereafter, but that's probably on the way. There are probably some more safety regulations on the way. There are also likely some other changes happening right now. They're talking about reducing the maximum acceleration default to maximum of 5 seconds, 0 to or min, like the fastest you can accelerate is 5 seconds, 0 to 100 kilometers per hour, which is like really more than what you need for daily driving, but then you can deprogram it. That I don't think is going to make a tremendous difference in sales, but it could make some disruption. All of these changes are going to be good for companies who have the development pipeline. Companies that are struggling in development pipeline are going to have a harder time, and that's going to be one of the things that drives consolidation. From a product perspective, we are seeing a massive improvement in terms of PHEVs. BYD just basically across the entire board doubled the electric range. You have people like Xpeng coming out with 400 kilometers plus of EV range in their PHEV, in their EREVs, which the line is getting blurred and more on that. So the product on that is getting better, partially driven by regulations. A big deal is being made about like the subsidies being phased out, but it's important to remember that this is a 10% purchase tax exemption up to maximum of $40,000 or $42,000 a year, or $42,000 vehicle, down to 5%. So if you look at the average, $15,000 BYD car, it's going from $1,500 subsidy to a $750 subsidy. That's significant. It's not as big as losing a $7,500 subsidy. So that's changing it. One other thing that was mentioned in that 5-year plan and in how China is approaching a lot of things is they are shifting more to rural development and ensuring that the benefits go out to rural areas. Building up that infrastructure in rural areas was mentioned. Right now, if you look at, let's say, a Shenzhen, you're looking at over 80% EV market share. We think of China as a monolith, but it's really a very geographically diverse country, and the mega cities look like Norway, and then the rural areas have much different purchase considerations. That was one of the reasons why Xpeng CEO mentioned that they were introducing EREVs, is to get to that next level of penetration where you're getting some of the rural areas. The charging infrastructure is being built up rapidly in those areas. So we could see an overall shift in where things are being purchased. In terms of short-term growth, I think Jose's on the right path. We're maybe 5% growth overall. in terms of what we can see next year. We might not hit 60%, maybe by the end of the year, but overall for the year, I'd say we're looking at about 5% market share growth. Overall economy, we're looking at stable but slowing growth, I would say overall for China, just based off of everything that's happening in the world. But still, 5% plus, which should keep elevating that, because we're seeing some of the market shift to rural areas. You're going to see potentially more, or you're seeing more emphasis shift to rural areas. We're going to potentially see more growth within those areas. The overall market could grow because the areas where people are wealthy enough to own cars is also going to grow. So lots of things are happening in China. It's moving fast. It's kind of hard to know exactly what is going to be the driving force next year. I will say that they are making major moves, which could cause a short-term disruption, but will set them up for long-term stable, market growth and adoption.
Yeah, the human mind, we tend to want to like simplify something to 1 or 2 points when it's very hard to do in situations like this. With that said, there were two things that recently jumped out to me. So one is what Steve mentioned with the 5-year plan, which I I'm I I'm a bit confused by, because I mean, it feels like it should still be an element, something like in the plan. And I've seen some people say that it's something that can be added, can be part of, you know, that later. It's just not at the moment being, focused on, prioritized. But I'm just not really clear what's going on there with the government's direction on that, or if they just feel like this market doesn't need any support from us anymore, so no point in focusing on it, or if it's a kind of case of, they've made statements this year with the industry, had meetings with the industry, is sort of like, you all need to like chill a little bit, or get yourselves together. You're acting a little bit crazy with the price wars, the price cuts, the always prioritizing the same thing in every city and every region. So I don't know if they're just trying to let the market get more organic, or if there's something like coming down the road that will be kind of a new approach to this market.
So to that point, there is one thing that they did say in the plan about reducing petroleum consumption. And we tend to think about everything in terms of carrots, in terms of incentives, and that's what dominates, policy here. China is not afraid of sticks. They're not afraid of, clamping down and reducing, putting disincentives in place. So it wouldn't surprise me if disincentives start to roll out. Electricity prices are cheap there. You could see some market shifts in terms of like pricing, in terms of fueling a vehicle, and that could drive a lot of change in that. I think that China already has mature EV product. They're already at price parity. They don't necessarily need to push the product or have gov- much government support for product development. They're already massively ahead. But I think that we might see kind of a fuel price reduction in terms of the continued growth of renewable energy in the country, as well as potential disincentives placed on ICE.
Yeah. So a second thing was, by the way, I really appreciate that context. I think that really helps, and definitely helps me feel less confused. So I appreciate you bringing in that information, which I didn't have. So a second thing is, under your article, Larry, on on how we not just add EVs, but start retiring fossil fueled vehicles. I think it was on that article that someone commented, but they provide a link to Slashdot, which is a discussion forum which I haven't really seen for years, but it's been very active in the past. It probably still is, where someone had commented about how certain EV automakers, EV producers in China were gaming the numbers by selling themselves vehicles and then selling them used just to get their new vehicle sales up. They were reportedly, this is about a rumor, as far as I can see, were trying to, get their numbers up by selling themselves new EVs and then mm, turning around and selling them as used EVs to customers with big price cuts. So I reached out to like a major EV producer in China about this just to see if they had any thoughts on this, like if they knew about this, because I was just looking for more information. Like, is this really happening? I wasn't expecting it from, a major EV producer, but I'm just curious, they have much better insight into those like many smaller EV companies. But they didn't bite. They didn't really, they provide me information on how EV sales are going up in China, how there's nothing to worry about, how the market's great and healthy and all this stuff. And like provide me a lot of interesting information, but didn't seem to have any insight or perspective on companies doing this. And so I don't really know. I don't know what's happening with with all these different companies. They're all different types of companies, but
there are some things.
What's that? Go ahead.
There are some things happening here for context, and like I think this overall issue is like, oh, they're just trying to inflate sales to make bragging points. No, these are businesses. They're trying to make money. So like, let's kind of temper that down. But the one thing that has been happening and is a significant driver and where this is going is people are buying cars. Dealers are buying cars as new, registering them, putting 0 miles on them, and then shipping them to other countries where they can be sold as used cars on the gray market. And gray market exports of basically new vehicles is a huge deal that's been happening globally. A lot of car makers are trying to stop that from happening, because what happens is you'll get a Chinese market vehicle, it gets to that market, it doesn't get the OTA updates, it doesn't get any dealer support, it doesn't have a warranty, and it has an overall bad buyer experience for the brand. It also, the brands don't have control over pricing or anything else that's going on with that. So that export is being addressed with a policy that's going to put some limitations on who can export these virtually new vehicles in terms of shipping policy. So that is being addressed. Automakers tend not to like this, buy it and then export it unofficially on the gray market kind of process that's been allowed to go on. So that's going to change that. You'll see more export sales as a result, likely, because what was a gray market export will now be a legitimate export. But there is some truth to that. The reasoning behind why it's happening is a little bit, distorted when you really start looking to how these vehicles are moving and where they're ending up.
Well, again, I think I speak for everyone. I hugely appreciate the extra context and information you provide there. Sometimes I really have no idea how you learn so much, but you do. So appreciate that, Larry. But yeah, I mean, yeah, but the overall trend at the larger EV companies has been so strong and so positive this year. Doesn't make any sense. I mean, BYD's had ups and downs, different issues with BYD, I guess, which is the behemoth. But other up and coming EV companies seem to be doing very well. So it doesn't seem likely that they would be having to resort to any funny business of any kind. But it is funny. I think I'm not sure. I don't want to get on too big of a side tangent, but I'm wondering if Tesla didn't figure out a little loophole for itself with the U.S. EV tax credit, which I'm about to write about today as well, because there was that surge to sell EVs before October 1st to qualify for the tax credit, and some automakers had worked out and confirmed with the IRS they could sell to dealers, and the dealers could log those tax credits and then pass them on in coming months. And there was a question like, well, does Tesla find any kind of loophole, because they're obviously the biggest EV and very connected to the administration. And Tesla has started a rental car program, which made me wonder, like, did they somehow sell themselves cars and now they're renting them? But I don't know. I'm gonna write about it, see what we have to say. But it is an interesting dynamic as these markets, grow and then don't grow as fast and then grow. How you manage some of these like ups and downs. But yeah, getting to the forecast, I am going to go out there. So I think, Jose, you said that the BEV market in China went from 25% to 32%.
Yep.
And I feel like being bullish. I want to be bullish because I just feel like Larry said, the market's competitive now. They should just keep following that adoption trend, and it's been actually much steeper in China than in earlier big markets like Norway, for obvious reasons, because the industry is much more developed. But at the same time, because of this 5-year plan, like not including them, and because of just the difficulty of increasing growth year over year, I'm going to go with that. I think that they will have 37% BEV market share next year. And I'll just go with 57%. I wanted to reach to 60. I wanted to because they tend to beat their targets. They tend to go faster than you expect. But I'm just a little nervous after the news this week. So I'm going to just go ahead with 57% plug-in vehicle share in 2026. And then we'll come back to 2030 after I get you guys'. We'll go back around and end with Jose. So let's go. Let's go, Steve. What's your wild ass guess for for 2026?
Are we still talking about China?
Yeah, just China.
I think your estimate probably makes sense. They are the adoption rate is encouraging, and it may be a little slower than we had hoped with the reduction in some of the incentives. But you mentioned the S curve, and if that concept is accurate, then they're on their way. And the closest analogy is Norway, and probably by 2030 we'll be looking at somewhere around 80% in China.
Larry, what's your thought for next year?
Yeah, I think 80% or next year, I'm kind of right with you around 57. Maybe hit 60 by the end of the year,
Yeah.
because you usually have a bump at the end of the year. But I think 57 sounds right. I'm also right around in that 80s. I think there are some challenges with China in that the majority of new purchasers right now are in their 30s and they're urban. And once you start getting towards above 80%, that's going to be a challenge because now you're getting into different demographics, you're getting into different geographies, different use cases. And a lot of that's going to depend on the infrastructure build out that's happening now. So I think that 80 is probably a good round number. I think they're going to have a little bit more of a challenge getting above 80 than Norway did. I think the slowing of the S curve and getting out the edge cases might take a little bit longer, but then, China has no problem just implementing policies that change that. So policy is going to be a big motivator, but I think Steve's on the right track.
So you guys are saying 80% for plug-in vehicles in 2030?
Yeah.
And what are you saying for BEVs?
I would say probably 50, 60. Somewhere in that range for BEVs.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah,
will,
I agree.
Oh, I was Jose's not really averse to disagreeing or putting out strong opinions, so I was we can let him close with especially as the EV sales expert globally. But I hadn't really thought. I'm gonna go bold and say, wait, what did you say for BEVs for 2030?
60.
Yeah, and I was agreeing with that, more or less around 60. I would like it to be a little bit above 60, just like I would like in 2030 the share to be a little bit above 80. But again, it will depend on policies. It will depend on charge infrastructure deployment. So let's go safe and say 80% for plugins, high 50 or 60 for BEVs in 2030 in China.
Okay, and what do you think for next year, Jose?
Yeah, I was saying 57 for next
Okay.
year and 37 for BVs. I have here something else to add. So why I'm keeping PHEVs at 20% share next year? One of the requirements that will be new for next year is that only cars with over 100 kilometers electric range or 62 miles on the Chinese cycle will be, I think, eligible for subsidy.
Mhm.
So what we will see probably is that a lot of those low-cost PHEVs will increase the battery to 100 kilometers or 62 miles, so increase the battery size. The question now is, will they keep the price or will they increase the price accordingly to keep the same profit?
So
So
just for
there might lose some sales.
so just on that one of the things I've been covering lately with BYD is they raised all of them above 100%, over 100 kilometers within the past 2 months. And at the same time, they kept the price the same. So if other automakers follow that lead and the price stays the same, but the capability increases, I think we could see some increase in PHEVs, if not like the end of the decline. I mean, PHEVs might stay relatively flat next year. Some automakers might pull out of PHEVs, which might lead to some decline. More capable PHEVs and additions like what we saw from Xpeng could raise that up. So I think that it's a dynamic. It's an important dynamic that you bring up, Jose.
Well, it's cool. We have a unanimous agreement on 2026. We're going with 37 and 57. Sorry. For 2030, I'm going to get a little more bold because look, we got 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030. This is a long time. And given the learning curve of batteries, how much they've come down in cost, we recently had this great chart of this great comparison of the original Nissan Leaf to the 2026 Nissan Leaf. I am going to go ahead and say I think 70% BEVs in 2030 and 90% plug-in vehicles. And just to give a little, I'm sure we have a lot of time to think about it before then. But I think it's fun to put it out there. Now we're going to talk about Europe and US EV sales, but this went a lot longer than I expected, which is great because you guys had so much to contribute. But this is 30 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and Paul was thinking we should make these 30 minutes long. So I am going to end this video, and we'll start another video in a second on both of those, or maybe do those separately as well, so we can focus on them separately, have the discussion separate for people who only care about one market or another. So stick with me, guys. But if you're watching on YouTube, check into the next video. And don't forget to subscribe and like and hype and all that stuff that helps us get more viewers.